Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe promised to form an all-party government capable of securing a multi-billion-dollar IMF bailout after being sworn in as president.
But so far, his appointments have angered protesters. VOA's Luke Hunt reports from Colombo.
Sri Lanka has been sorely tested by protesters fed up with hyperinflation and fuel lines stretching for 2 to 3 kilometres, with motorists and thousands of tuk-tuk drivers forced to sleep out for days on end. Ration cards have been introduced for fuel distribution, but medical supplies remain in short supply, and doctors have warned that people could die as the situation worsens. That has been widely blamed on the ousted president who fled the country. Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigned his office from Singapore after hundreds of thousands of protesters marched on the presidential complex, where they even swam in the president's pool. His family had ruled Sri Lanka for 17 years. Ganeshan Vagnajara, a senior fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, says Sri Lanka's drastic plight is due to mismanagement and corruption.
Growth is at -4 to -6% in 2022, and inflation is between 50 and 70% this year, and there's 750,000 poor people that have been created through this crisis.
Vagnajara also says accusations that China had laid a debt trap were exaggerated, saying that Beijing is ranked third among Sri Lanka's lenders, behind Japan and the Asian Development Bank.
China gave Sri Lanka $13.2 billion since 2006 for infrastructure projects. These projects have had mixed results, some good projects, some bad projects. The total debt burden is something like $7.6 billion, which suggests a rising debt to China, but does not indicate that Sri Lanka is yet in a Chinese debt trap.
Wickremesinghe had promised to form an all-party government in a bid to solve the crisis, but instead he has promoted close allies of the ousted president to cabinet. That includes the former Home Minister and former Rajapaksa school classmate Dinesh Gunawardena, who has been named Prime Minister. Protesters were upset by the appointment, and on Friday morning, police and army soldiers began forcibly dismantling their tent camp, erected outside the presidential complex, resulting in clashes with protesters and prompting an outcry from human rights groups. Protesters and Sri Lankan investigators have claimed that billions of dollars have been siphoned off into offshore bank accounts by associates of the Rajapaksas, leading to calls for an independent investigation into the family's wealth and an asset recovery program, although that could take years. Members of the Rajapaksa family dispute the charge.